Michelle Carter walked through the brightly lit hallways of the TV studio, making last-minute adjustments to her schedule while smiling at colleagues passing by. At 36, she was one of the most respected and beloved faces on Atlanta television. Elegant, charismatic, and with a unique ability to connect with her audience, Michelle had earned her place through hard work and undeniable talent. "Good morning, TV queen," joked Lisa Johnson, her best friend and the show's producer, as she saw her approaching the meeting room. "Good morning, Lisa," Michelle replied warmly. "Are we all set for today's big show?" "We're ready. But you know how unpredictable Richard Collins can be. Be careful, he might give you a headache on air," Lisa said while handing some papers to Michelle. Michelle gave a slight smile and shook her head. "Oh, I've dealt with worse. A little charm and professionalism will do the trick." She knew her job was more than just conducting interviews. For Michelle, being one of the few prominent black hosts on TV carried a huge responsibility. Representing her community with dignity, strength, and intelligence was a mission she took seriously. As she walked to her dressing room, she reflected on the challenges she had faced over the years. There were always people who doubted her abilities because of the color of her skin, but Michelle had learned to turn every obstacle into fuel to keep moving forward. "Michelle, the director wants to speak with you before we go live," one of the assistants informed her, knocking gently on the dressing room door. "Of course, I'll be right there," she replied, adjusting the collar of her stylish blouse. When she arrived at the director's office, she found David Peterson, the network's director, sitting at his desk, reviewing the final details of the script. "Michelle, I just wanted to stop by real quick and thank you for the amazing work you've been doing. Ratings are through the roof, and the audience absolutely loves you," David said, looking at her with admiration. "Thank you, David. I do my best. And with a team this good, it's easy," she responded with a genuine smile. David nodded. "Today's show is going to be controversial, but I trust you. Just, stay calm with Richard, okay? He's known to push boundaries." Michelle chuckled softly. "Don't worry. I know how to handle his type. It's going to be a great interview, I promise." As she prepared for the show, she felt that familiar mix of excitement and responsibility. Every time she stepped onto the stage, she knew she wasn't just representing herself, she was representing millions of people who saw themselves in her story, her struggles, and her victories. "Time to shine," she whispered to herself before heading to the stage. The camera was already in position, and the audience was eagerly waiting. When the studio lights came on and the show's theme music began to play, Michelle took a deep breath. Another day, another opportunity to make a difference. "Good afternoon, Atlanta. I'm Michelle Carter, and this is Talk Show Atlanta," she said with that magnetic smile that captivated everyone around her. The live audience applauded, and she felt the energy surging. But even Michelle couldn't predict what that day would bring. The studio was buzzing with anticipation as the crew made the final adjustments for today's interview. Michelle Carter sat in her chair, glancing over her notes about the guest she was about to interview. Richard Collins, a 28-year-old tech entrepreneur, had been making headlines recently, not just for his innovative business ideas, but also for his controversial opinions. Lisa Johnson, the show's producer, stood nearby, watching the stage being set up. "You ready for him, Michelle?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I'm ready," Michelle responded confidently, knowing full well that Lisa wasn't just talking about technical preparations. She was referring to Richard's personality and the challenge he could present on live television. "I just hope he sticks to business and doesn't start spouting off his usual nonsense," Lisa said, handing Michelle a final briefing on some of Richard's recent comments. Michelle smiled slightly. "Don't worry. If he starts to wander off, I'll steer him back. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt." As the countdown to the live broadcast began, the stage crew took their positions. Richard had just arrived at the studio, and Michelle caught a glimpse of him through the glass window. Dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, he looked every bit the successful entrepreneur, but there was an air of arrogance about him. Michelle had dealt with many men like him, people who thought they could control the conversation. But she knew how to hold her own. Lisa leaned in one last time before the cameras rolled. Just remember, today's focus is his business success. Don't let him derail it. Michelle smiled. Don't worry. I've got this. The studio lights dimmed, and the show's familiar theme music played. The audience clapped as Michelle began her introduction. Good afternoon, Atlanta. Today, we have a very special guest. He's been making waves in the tech industry with his innovative work and has recently been the subject of much media attention. Please welcome Richard Collins. The camera cut to Richard as he walked onto the stage, a confident smirk on his face. He waved to the audience before taking a seat across from Michelle. Richard, welcome to Talk Show Atlanta, Michelle said, extending her hand. Thanks for having me, Michelle, Richard replied, shaking her hand with a firm grip. It's a pleasure to be here. Michelle didn't waste any time getting into the interview. You've had an impressive rise in the tech world. Your company, Collins Innovations, has been revolutionizing the way we use technology. Tell us, what inspired you to start this journey? Richard leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the spotlight. Well, I've always been a visionary. I see things that others don't, and that's what sets me apart. My company is all about pushing boundaries, doing things nobody else is doing. Michelle nodded, keeping the conversation focused. That drive for innovation is definitely admirable. But it's also your strong opinions outside of business that have drawn public attention. How do you balance that with running such a successful company? Richard's smirk widened. Oh, people are just too sensitive these days. Everyone's always looking for something to be offended by. I say what's on my mind, and if that rubs people the wrong way, so be it. Michelle could feel the conversation drifting into risky territory. She decided to gently steer it back to his company. Your latest product has certainly shaken up the tech world. Can you tell us more about the development process behind it? Richard gave a dismissive wave. The product is great, no doubt. But honestly, what's more interesting is how people react to success, especially when they don't think you deserve it. Some people say I had it easy because of my background. But I've worked hard. I didn't have any special advantages growing up. Well, except maybe that I didn't have to deal with certain obstacles. Michelle raised an eyebrow, sensing a shift in his tone. What do you mean by obstacles? Richard leaned forward with a smirk. You know, some people in this country have to prove themselves, like me. But others, well, they get a free pass because of all this political correctness. They're untouchable. You can't criticize them without being labeled something you're not. The tension in the studio began to build. Michelle's instincts kicked in, and she immediately knew where this conversation was headed. Maintaining her composure, she responded, Richard, success looks different for everyone, and people's journeys are unique. Don't you think it's important to acknowledge the challenges that different communities face, especially when it comes to opportunities? Richard let out a laugh that seemed to chill the room. Come on, Michelle. We both know some people use their identity as a shield. They get ahead by playing the victim. And then the rest of us, people like me, are labeled the bad guys just for speaking the truth. Michelle felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but she kept her composure. I think it's important to approach every discussion with respect and understanding. Everyone's story is valid, Anne. Richard cut her off, his tone sharp. Oh, please. We both know there are people who use their skin color or gender to get ahead. You should know better than anyone. The studio grew quieter, the tension almost unbearable. Michelle paused, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She could feel the eyes of the live audience, waiting for her response. The tension in the studio had become almost unbearable. Michelle's heart was pounding as Richard's words echoed in her mind. The casual way he dismissed her experiences and those of countless others felt like a direct attack. But she knew she had to stay professional. The cameras were still rolling. Millions of viewers were watching her, expecting her to keep her cool. She'd faced tough situations on air before, but nothing quite like this. Michelle could feel the eyes of the crew on her, and Lisa, standing just off stage, looked ready to jump in if things got worse. "Richard," Michelle began, her voice calm but with an undeniable edge, "I think we need to be careful when we start making blanket statements about people's experiences. Identity isn't a shield, it's..." Richard interrupted her again, his voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, come on, Michelle. Let's not pretend here. People like you have it easier now because everyone's bending over backward to avoid offending you." Michelle froze for a moment. It wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it, so dismissive, so sure of himself. For a split second, she didn't know how to respond. Her professional facade was beginning to crack. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Michelle took a deep breath, trying to regain control. But it was hard to keep the emotions at bay. Her entire career had been built on pushing through moments like this, but this time, it felt different. "Richard," she said quietly, "it's not about having it easier. It's about being seen, being heard, and being respected." Richard scoffed. "Respect? Please. Respect is earned. And frankly, I don't see what all this fuss is about. If you work hard enough, you don't need to rely on identity politics to succeed." It was at that moment Michelle felt something inside her break. The years of microaggressions, the constant fight to prove herself in spaces where she was often the only black woman, the pressure of having to be perfect, everything came rushing to the surface. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill over. She couldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Not in front of the cameras. But it was too late. A single tear slipped down her cheek. And then another. Lisa, who had been watching closely from the side of the stage, immediately motioned to the director to cut to a commercial break. The screen went black, and the show's logo filled the screen as the cameras stopped rolling. In the now quiet studio, Michelle sat there, her face in her hands, trying to pull herself together. The tears were flowing freely now, and she couldn't stop them. Lisa rushed over, kneeling beside her. "Michelle, it's okay. We're off air. Take your time." "I'm sorry," Michelle whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to let him get to me like that. I've dealt with worse." Lisa placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "You don't have to apologize. He crossed a line, and you held it together as best you could. No one expects you to be invincible." Michelle wiped her eyes, still struggling to regain her composure. I didn't want him to win. I didn't want him to see me break." Lisa shook her head. "He didn't win, Michelle. You showed more strength in that moment than he ever could. And we've got your back." Just then, a few of the crew members approached, their faces filled with concern and solidarity. John, one of the camera operators who had been with Michelle for years, spoke up. "Michelle, we're all behind you. You've handled that guy better than anyone else could have. Don't let him make you feel small." Michelle gave a small nod, still feeling the weight of what had just happened. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice shaky but full of gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you all." Lisa stood up, addressing the crew. "All right, let's give her some space. We'll figure out what to do next." As the crew dispersed, Michelle sat there, her mind racing. She had always known that moments like these were inevitable. But nothing could have prepared her for how deeply it would cut when it finally happened. Lisa turned back to her. "We can stop here for today if you want. We don't have to go back on air." But Michelle shook her head. "No, we finish. I won't let him have the last word." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stand. "I've worked too hard to let someone like him make me feel like I don't belong here." Lisa smiled, a look of pride in her eyes. "That's the Michelle I know." With one last glance at the mirror to wipe away the traces of her tears, Michelle straightened her shoulders and walked back to the stage. The cameras would roll again soon, and this time, she would be ready. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted. The once bustling, energetic crew had grown quiet, their movements subdued as they prepared to resume the live broadcast. Michelle stood backstage, taking deep breaths, trying to steady her emotions. The sting of Richard's words still lingered, but now she had something stronger pushing her forward, her sense of purpose. Lisa approached Michelle one last time before they went live again. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked gently. "We can cut the segment short, maybe bring in a backup guest." Michelle shook her head firmly. "No. I'm not backing down because of him. I need to finish this, for me and for everyone watching." Lisa nodded, understanding. "Okay, but if it gets too much, just give me a signal. We'll go to another break." As Lisa walked away to give the final instructions to the crew, Michelle closed her eyes for a brief moment. She thought about all the young black women who might be watching her right now. They needed to see her strength, to know that they too could rise above moments like this. With renewed determination, she stepped back onto the set. The studio lights came back up, and the theme music played softly as the camera panned back to Michelle, seated across from Richard once more. The tension between them was palpable, but Michelle was composed, her face calm and steady. "Welcome back, everyone," she began, her voice firm but composed. "Before we continue our conversation, I want to take a moment to acknowledge what just happened. Here at Talk Show Atlanta, we believe in fostering meaningful, respectful dialogue, even when opinions differ. However, it's important to recognize when words cross a line and become hurtful, not just to me, but to many others." Richard, sitting with a smug expression, leaned forward slightly. "Michelle, I didn't mean to offend you personally. I'm just saying what I believe. Isn't that what this show is about, having open conversations?" Michelle held his gaze, her voice unwavering. "Richard, having an open conversation means being willing to listen as well as speak. And it also means recognizing the impact your words can have on others, especially when those words come from a place of privilege." He scoffed. "Privilege? Here we go again. People always throw that word around like it's an excuse for." Michelle cut him off, not allowing him to derail the conversation any further. "Yes, privilege. And it's real, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. For many people, especially those from marginalized communities, it's something they contend with every single day. Dismissing their experiences doesn't make you more honest, it makes you more ignorant." The audience, silent throughout the exchange, began to clap softly. The support was subtle but enough to fuel Michelle's resolve. Richard leaned back in his chair, his smugness faltering. "I'm just tired of people acting like victims," he muttered, folding his arms. Michelle leaned forward, her eyes fixed on him. "And I'm tired of people dismissing the realities that so many face, realities that you've never had to live. You might not understand what it's like to be judged by the color of your skin the moment you walk into a room, but that doesn't give you the right to mock those who do." For a moment, Richard seemed unsure of how to respond. He opened his mouth to speak but stopped himself, sensing the shift in the room. Michelle turned to the camera, her voice softening. "To everyone watching today, I want to remind you that your experiences matter. Don't let anyone diminish your story or make you feel less than. We all deserve respect, and that's what we should be working toward, understanding, not division. Lisa, standing just off stage, gave a slight nod to the crew. They had prepared for a shorter segment, but Michelle's words had changed the tone. They would let her lead, and she was leading with grace. Turning back to Richard, Michelle smiled slightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Richard, I hope you can walk away from this conversation today with a deeper understanding of the weight your words carry. We might not agree on everything, but we can at least agree on the importance of treating each other with respect." Richard hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fair enough," he said, his tone subdued. As the segment wrapped up, Michelle addressed the audience one last time. "Thank you all for joining us today. These conversations are never easy, but they're necessary. I hope today has given you something to think about, and that we can all continue to strive for a world where everyone's voice is heard and respected." The cameras stopped rolling, and the studio lights dimmed. There was a heavy silence in the room, followed by a wave of applause from the crew and audience members. Michelle stood up slowly, feeling the exhaustion of the moment settle in. Lisa approached her with a proud smile. "You did it, Michelle. You handled that perfectly." Michelle let out a long breath, her shoulders relaxing. "I wasn't sure I could," she admitted quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "You didn't just handle it, you owned it," Lisa said. "You spoke for so many people who needed to hear that today." Michelle smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. "I just hope it makes a difference." As the crew began to pack up for the day, Michelle caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked tired, but strong. She had faced one of her hardest moments on live television, and she had come out on the other side with her dignity intact. This was far from over, but in that moment, Michelle knew she had taken the first step towards something bigger. And she wasn't going to stop now. The next day, the world felt different for Michelle. Her confrontation with Richard had gone viral overnight. Clips of the incident were everywhere, news outlets, social media, even talk shows across the country. Everyone had an opinion, and Michelle found herself at the center of a national conversation about race, respect, and privilege. As Michelle walked into the studio the following morning, her phone buzzed non-stop with messages and notifications. Some were supportive, praising her courage, while others were filled with hateful comments that cut deep. Lisa greeted her at the door, holding a cup of coffee and wearing a concerned expression. "You okay? The whole world's talking about you." Michelle let out a sigh, glancing at her phone once again before shoving it into her bag. "I don't know, Lisa. I thought I'd be okay with it, but seeing all this, it's a lot. Some people are being so cruel." Lisa nodded, her face serious. "I've seen the comments, too. Some are disgusting. But there are also a lot of people standing up for you, Michelle. You've sparked something important here. You knew it wouldn't be easy." "I did," Michelle said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But I wasn't ready for the hate. I mean, I knew it was out there, but to see it, to read it, it's overwhelming." Lisa wrapped an arm around her friend's shoulder, offering comfort. "You don't have to go through this alone. We're all here with you." As they walked further into the studio, Michelle noticed several of her co-workers giving her supportive nods or offering quiet words of encouragement. It was clear that the incident had affected not just her, but everyone around her. John, the camera operator, approached with a warm smile. "Michelle, I just want to say, you're a hero. What you did on air yesterday? It took guts. My wife and I watched the clip last night, and she couldn't stop talking about how proud she was of you." Michelle smiled, though her heart still felt heavy. "Thank you, John. That means a lot." But even with all the support, Michelle couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. She was used to being in the spotlight, but this was different. She had always controlled the narrative, until now. Later that afternoon, as she prepared for the day's show, Lisa knocked on the dressing room door and peeked in. "Hey, there's someone here to see you." Michelle frowned, unsure of who it could be. "Who?" "A guest," Lisa said, her tone hesitant. "She's been waiting for a while. She said it's important." Curious, Michelle stood and followed Lisa to the lobby, where a young woman sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous, fidgeting with the straps of her bag. When she saw Michelle, her face lit up with a mix of awe and relief. "Michelle," the young woman said, standing up quickly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I just had to come and see you in person." Michelle smiled, though she was unsure of what the woman wanted. "No bother at all. What can I do for you?" The young woman hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "I saw your interview yesterday. The way you stood up to that man, the way you spoke about respect and dignity, it changed something in me. I've been struggling with similar issues at work, but I never felt brave enough to say anything. Watching you, I realized I can't stay silent anymore." Michelle's heart swelled with emotion. "I'm glad my words resonated with you. It's not easy, but sometimes we have to stand up for ourselves, even when it's hard." "I know," the woman said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you. You have no idea how much you've inspired me." Michelle took a deep breath, her eyes misting over. "Thank you for telling me that. You have no idea how much that means to me, especially today." As the woman left, Michelle stood in the lobby for a moment, processing everything. The weight of the past 24 hours was still heavy, but there was something else now: hope. She had made a difference in someone's life. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something bigger. Returning to the set, Michelle felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a television host anymore. She had become a voice for those who needed one, a symbol of resilience in the face of hate. As she sat down in the makeup chair, Lisa appeared beside her again, a smile playing on her lips. "You ready for today?" Michelle met her gaze in the mirror, her own reflection looking back with determination. More than ever. The day after the viral storm had swept through her life, Michelle sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. It had been buzzing non-stop with calls, texts, and emails, most of them from media outlets looking for interviews or follow-ups. She was being thrust into a new spotlight, one she hadn't asked for. The pressure was mounting, and she could feel the weight of it with every new notification. Her husband, James, entered the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee, setting one down in front of her. "How are you holding up?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Michelle let out a long sigh, her eyes still fixed on her phone. "I don't know, James. It feels like everything is spinning out of control. Yesterday I was just doing my job, and now, this." James sat across from her, his gaze steady. "You were doing more than your job. You stood up for yourself, and for a lot of people who needed to hear that. You can't control how the world reacts, but what you did mattered." "I know, but it's hard to ignore the negativity," she admitted, her voice soft. "Some of the messages I've gotten, they're awful. I knew there'd be backlash, but I didn't expect this." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Listen to the people who support you. Don't give those other voices more power than they deserve." Michelle nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. She appreciated James's support, but the weight of everything was starting to wear her down. It wasn't just the hateful messages or the pressure from the media, it was the realization that she had been thrust into a conversation about race and privilege that she wasn't sure she was ready to lead. Later that morning, as Michelle arrived at the studio, the tension was palpable. The crew was more cautious than usual, speaking in hushed tones and casting sympathetic glances her way. The day's schedule had been rearranged to address the ongoing conversation, and the producers had lined up several guests to discuss the issue of racism in media. Lisa was waiting for Michelle in her dressing room, going over the day's rundown. "You're going to be leading a panel discussion today," she explained, her voice calm but firm. We've brought in some experts, journalists, activists, and a psychologist. It's going to be intense, but we need to address this head-on. Michelle nodded, feeling a wave of nerves hit her. I just don't want to make this all about me. There's a bigger conversation that needs to happen. And that's exactly why you're the right person to lead it, Lisa said. You've got the platform, and you've already shown the world that you're not afraid to speak up. Now you can help shape the conversation. The show went live, and the panelists joined Michelle on set. The topic was clear: how race and privilege shaped the media landscape, and how incidents like the one Michelle had experienced were part of a larger, systemic issue. The first panelist, a well-known journalist named Angela Thomas, spoke passionately about the importance of addressing racial bias in media. What Michelle went through on air is something that happens to black women every day, maybe not on TV, but in boardrooms, classrooms, and on the street, Angela said. This is a moment where we have to confront those uncomfortable truths. Another panelist, Dr. Marcus Bailey, a psychologist who specialized in racial trauma, added, the psychological toll this kind of public attack can take is immense. It's not just about the moment itself, it's about the years of compounded microaggressions and overt racism that people of color endure. And when it happens on such a public stage, like it did with Michelle, it brings all of that to the surface. Michelle listened intently, nodding along as the conversation unfolded. She was relieved to be in the company of people who understood the weight of what had happened, and who were able to articulate the complexities of the issue in ways she hadn't yet processed. When the discussion turned back to her, Michelle took a deep breath before speaking. I've spent my career in front of the camera, and I've always known that, as a black woman, I would be judged differently. But what happened during that interview wasn't just about me. It was a reminder of how far we still have to go when it comes to addressing racism in this country. The room fell quiet as Michelle continued. I've received so many messages from people, mostly black women, who told me that they've experienced the same kind of treatment, whether it's in their workplace or just walking down the street. It's exhausting. And honestly, I don't have all the answers, but I do know that this is a conversation we can't shy away from anymore. As the show wrapped up, there was a sense of gravity in the air. Michelle had led the discussion with grace and authenticity, and though the conversation was difficult, it felt necessary. She was still processing everything that had happened, but she knew this was just the beginning of something much larger. Backstage, Lisa met Michelle with a relieved smile. You killed it out there. That was exactly what we needed. Michelle, still processing the emotional toll of the conversation, smiled weakly. I'm just glad we were able to talk about it in a real way. Lisa nodded, her voice softening. You've started something here, Michelle. And I think you're the perfect person to keep it going. As Michelle packed up for the day, she felt a mix of exhaustion and purpose. The hate she had faced wasn't going away, but neither was the support. And now, she had a platform, a responsibility, to continue the conversation. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear: she wasn't going to back down. This was her fight now, and she was ready to see it through. The following week, Michelle found herself in an emotional whirlwind. The panel discussion had garnered praise from audiences and critics alike, but with the praise came a new wave of intense scrutiny. Every move she made was dissected by both supporters and detractors. She had never been one to shy away from public attention. After all, she had spent over a decade in front of the camera, but this was different. This was personal. One evening, after wrapping up a particularly exhausting day at the studio, Michelle returned home to find her phone buzzing with a call from an unknown number. She stared at it for a moment, debating whether or not to pick up. Something told her she should. Hello? She answered hesitantly. A pause followed, then a familiar voice came through, laced with an air of arrogance. Michelle. It's Richard Thompson. Her heart dropped. She hadn't spoken to him since the interview. Richard? "What, why are you calling me?" "I think we need to talk," he replied, his tone cold but with an undercurrent of discomfort. "This situation has gotten way out of hand. It's everywhere. My company, my reputation, it's been dragged through the mud because of that interview." Michelle's jaw clenched, frustration boiling up inside her. "You mean because of your behavior during that interview? Because of the way you disrespected me, and countless others watching?" "You misunderstood me," Richard shot back defensively. "I was trying to make a point, but this whole thing spiraled out of control. You took it too personally, and now people are crucifying me. It's hurting my business." Michelle could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Too personally? Richard, you called me out on live television for no reason other than to belittle me. People saw you for who you are, and they reacted. If you're suffering consequences, that's on you." There was another long pause on the line, as if Richard was struggling to find the right words. Finally, he sighed. "Look, I didn't call to argue. I think we should put this behind us, publicly. Issue a joint statement, say it was a misunderstanding, and move on. It'll help both of us." Michelle's eyes widened in disbelief. "You think I'm going to lie to protect your reputation? I'm offering you a way out, too, Michelle. This is going to stick with you if you let it. Do you really want to be defined by this one incident?" For a moment, Michelle sat in stunned silence. The nerve of him to assume she would consider such a thing. She could hear James moving in the kitchen, unaware of the conversation she was having. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but firm. "I won't be defined by this incident," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "But I also won't sweep it under the rug to make you feel better. You had your chance to apologize on air, and instead, you doubled down. People saw the truth, and I'm not going to undo that because you're uncomfortable." Richard let out a bitter laugh. "You think you're some kind of hero now, don't you? This isn't about justice, Michelle. It's about making a spectacle." Michelle's anger simmered, but she refused to let him provoke her further. "You don't get it, Richard. This isn't about me. It's about all the people who have to endure what you did to me every day, but don't have the platform to fight back. I do. And I'm not going to waste it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Richard finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost resigned. "I see. Well. I hope you know what you're doing." "I do," Michelle said confidently before hanging up. As she set her phone down, she realized her hands were trembling slightly. She had expected the conversation to bring closure, but instead, it left her feeling even more unsettled. She knew she had made the right decision, but it didn't make the weight of everything she was carrying any lighter. James walked into the living room, sensing something was off. "Who was that?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Richard," Michelle replied, still processing the call. "He wanted me to issue a joint statement, to make it seem like the whole thing was just a misunderstanding." James's brow furrowed. "And you said no, right?" "Of course," Michelle said, her voice firm. "I'm not going to lie just to protect his reputation." James nodded, coming over to sit beside her. "You did the right thing. People need to see the truth, even if it's uncomfortable." Michelle leaned back against the couch, letting out a deep breath. "I know. I just didn't expect this to get so big. I feel like I'm carrying this burden for everyone who's ever faced this kind of treatment, and it's heavy." James took her hand in his. "You don't have to carry it alone. You've got me, your friends, and so many people out there who support you." Michelle looked at him, grateful for his steady presence. "I know. I just hope I can live up to what people expect of me now." "You already have," James said softly. "And you're going to keep doing it, one step at a time." As the evening wore on, Michelle found herself reflecting on everything that had happened since the interview. The world was watching her, and the pressure was immense. But she knew now more than ever that this was about more than just her. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. And she wasn't going to back down. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity for Michelle. The media storm had settled slightly, but the discussions and debates continued to swirl around her. Her personal life had become a topic of public interest, and every day seemed to bring a new headline or an opinion piece about her experience. Despite the chaos, Michelle remained determined to use her platform for something meaningful. One crisp autumn morning, Michelle walked into the studio to find Lisa waiting for her with an anxious expression. "Hey, Michelle. I think you should see this," Lisa said, handing her a tablet. Michelle glanced at the screen, where she saw a news clip from a popular talk show. The host was discussing the recent events and, surprisingly, had invited Michelle's parents to speak about her on the show. "Why are they on this?" Michelle asked, her brow furrowing. "I didn't think they wanted any part of this." Lisa shook her head. "I didn't know either, but it seems they reached out to the show themselves. They want to share their perspective on what's happening with you." Michelle felt a mix of emotions. Her parents had always been supportive, but they had generally preferred to stay out of the public eye. Seeing them on national television discussing her situation was unexpected and somewhat unsettling. "I need to call them," Michelle said, her voice tinged with concern. "I want to know what's going on." As she dialed her parents' number, she could feel her heart pounding. After a few rings, her mother's familiar voice answered. "Hello, Michelle." "Mom, it's me. I saw the news clip. Why are you and Dad talking about me on TV?" There was a pause, then her mother spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We wanted to speak up because we're proud of you, and we believe in the importance of what you're doing. You're facing this with so much courage, and we thought it was time for people to understand how this affects not just you, but your family too." Michelle took a deep breath, trying to process her mother's words. "I appreciate that, but I didn't expect this. I don't want you two to be dragged into all of this drama." Her mother's voice softened. "We're not doing this for drama, Michelle. We're doing it because it's important. People need to see that behind every headline, there's a real person, a real family. We want them to know the impact this kind of treatment has on all of us." Michelle's heart ached with a mix of pride and worry. "I understand. Thank you for your support. I just hope this doesn't make things harder for you." "We're fine, sweetheart," her mother assured her. "We're strong. We just want to stand by you and show that we're united in this." After hanging up, Michelle felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her parents' support was a reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. She had her family behind her, and that gave her strength. As Michelle prepared for her show that evening, she couldn't help but reflect on the personal impact of the public scrutiny she had faced. It wasn't just about the media frenzy, it was about the real-life consequences for those she loved. On set, Lisa approached with a warm smile. "You okay?" Michelle nodded, her expression determined. "Yeah. Just had a conversation with my parents. They're speaking out about this too." Lisa's eyes softened with understanding. "It's good that they're supporting you. It can be tough when it feels like everything is so public, but having your family's backing means a lot." Michelle took a deep breath, ready to face the cameras once again. "I know. And I'm ready to keep fighting, not just for myself but for everyone who's been through something similar." As the show began, Michelle felt a sense of calm wash over her. The stage was familiar, the lights warm. She knew that the discussion tonight would be about the broader impact of the issues she had faced, and she was determined to use her voice to bring about change. The show opened with Michelle introducing the topic of racial bias and media representation. She spoke eloquently, sharing her own experiences while highlighting the stories of others who had faced similar challenges. Throughout the show, viewers called in, sharing their own stories and expressing their support. Michelle listened with empathy and responded with sincerity, knowing that this was more than just a broadcast. It was a platform for real dialogue and connection. As the show concluded, Michelle received an outpouring of messages from viewers expressing their gratitude and admiration. Many shared how her courage had inspired them to speak out or stand up for themselves in their own lives. Backstage, Lisa gave Michelle a reassuring hug. "You did amazing tonight. You're making a real difference." Michelle smiled, her heart full. "Thank you. I just hope this is the beginning of a bigger conversation." Lisa nodded. "It is. And you're leading it." As Michelle left the studio that night, she felt a renewed sense of hope. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but with her family's support and the platform she had, she was ready to face whatever came next. This was her moment to make a difference, and she was determined to seize it. The days following Michelle's heartfelt show were both hectic and surprisingly uplifting. While the media continued to discuss her interview, an unexpected development added a new layer to the story. One afternoon, as Michelle was wrapping up her day at the studio, she received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" Michelle answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Michelle, it's Anna Davis," came the voice on the other end. Anna was a prominent civil rights lawyer who had been following Michelle's story closely. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Michelle's eyes widened in surprise. "No, not at all. What can I do for you, Ms. Davis? I've been watching your coverage and the way you've handled everything with such grace and strength. I wanted to reach out and offer my support. I believe your experience sheds light on a crucial issue that needs more attention." Michelle was taken aback. "Thank you. I appreciate that. What kind of support do you have in mind?" Anna's voice was warm and reassuring. "I'd like to help you amplify your message. I can connect you with legal experts and advocacy groups that could support your cause and ensure that this conversation leads to real change. We also could organize a panel discussion to keep the dialogue going and bring more awareness." Michelle's heart raced with hope and nervousness. "That sounds amazing. But I don't want to overstep or take on more than I can handle." Anna chuckled softly. "You're already handling so much, Michelle. This is about leveraging the momentum you've created to drive meaningful change. We'll be here to help every step of the way." Before they hung up, Anna made sure to reassure Michelle. "I'll have my office send over some preliminary materials and set up a meeting for us. Don't worry, we'll make sure you're well supported." A few days later, Michelle found herself in a conference room with Anna Davis and several legal and advocacy experts. They discussed strategies for using Michelle's platform to address broader issues of racial bias and discrimination. The meeting was intense, but Michelle felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Later that week, Michelle sat with Lisa, reviewing the details of an upcoming panel discussion that would feature prominent activists, scholars, and legal experts. Lisa was busy preparing the logistics, but she paused to look at Michelle. "Are you ready for this?" Lisa asked, a mix of excitement and concern in her voice. Michelle nodded, her expression resolute. "I am. This is more than just about me now. It's about creating a space for these conversations and pushing for real change." Lisa gave her a supportive smile. "You've got this. And you're not alone in this fight." On the day of the panel discussion, the studio was abuzz with energy. The set was designed to foster an open dialogue, with comfortable seating and a welcoming atmosphere. Michelle took a deep breath as she prepared to take the stage. As she walked out to the set, she was greeted by the panelists and the audience's enthusiastic applause. Michelle took her seat, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. The discussion began with Michelle sharing her personal experiences and the impact they had on her. The panelists contributed their insights, discussing the systemic issues behind the incidents Michelle had faced and the broader implications for society. A young woman in the audience, visibly moved, raised her hand to ask a question. How can people like me, who aren't in the public eye, support this cause and make a difference in our communities? Michelle smiled, appreciating the sincerity of the question. It starts with understanding and empathy. Use your voice, support organizations that are working toward change, and stand up when you see injustice. Even small actions can contribute to a bigger impact. The discussion continued, with lively debates and thoughtful exchanges. Michelle felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she saw the positive reactions from the audience and the panelists. It was clear that the conversation was resonating with people and encouraging them to think critically about the issues at hand. As the panel wrapped up, Michelle received a standing ovation. She felt a wave of gratitude and relief. The event had been a success, and it was evident that her efforts were sparking meaningful dialogue. After the event, Michelle and Anna Davis shared a quiet moment backstage. "You did a fantastic job today," Anna said, her voice filled with admiration. "You've made a significant impact." Michelle's eyes glistened with tears of gratitude. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without all the support I've received. It's been a challenging journey, but it's worth it if it leads to change." Anna smiled warmly. "And this is just the beginning. We have more work ahead, but together, we can continue to drive progress." As Michelle left the studio that evening, she felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. The panel discussion had not only been a platform for her to share her story but also a catalyst for broader conversations about racial bias and discrimination. The support she had received from unexpected allies like Anna Davis, along with the encouragement from her friends and family, fueled her determination to keep pushing for change. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but with the collective effort of those who believed in her cause, she felt more equipped than ever to face the future and make a difference. As the weeks passed, Michelle's advocacy work gained momentum. The panel discussion had sparked significant interest, and she found herself fielding invitations to speak at various events and forums. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages of support and requests for interviews. Though it was overwhelming, Michelle felt invigorated by the opportunity to continue her mission. One afternoon, while Michelle was going over her schedule with Lisa, the door to her office opened, and Anna Davis walked in with a folder in hand. "Hey, Anna," Michelle greeted her warmly. "What's up?" Anna took a seat and placed the folder on the desk. "I've got some exciting news. We've been working on a joint initiative with several organizations to promote racial equity and inclusion in the media." Michelle's eyes lit up with interest. "That sounds incredible. What's involved?" Anna opened the folder to reveal a detailed proposal. The initiative will include a series of workshops and training sessions for media professionals on how to address and report on racial issues more responsibly. We're also planning a public awareness campaign to highlight the importance of diversity and representation. Lisa leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "How can Michelle get involved?" Anna smiled. "Michelle will be a key speaker and advocate for the initiative. Her story and experience have already made a significant impact, and her voice will be crucial in shaping this project." Michelle felt a wave of excitement and responsibility. "I'm honored to be a part of this. How do we get started?" Anna handed Michelle a document outlining the initial steps. "We'll be launching the campaign in a few months. In the meantime, we need to start coordinating with the media partners and setting up the first round of workshops." Michelle nodded, absorbing the information. "I'll make sure to clear my schedule for this. It's important work, and I'm ready to dive in." Anna gave her a supportive nod. "Fantastic. We'll keep you updated on the progress and schedule a meeting soon to discuss further details." As Anna left the office, Lisa looked at Michelle with admiration. "You're really making a difference, Michelle. This is huge." Michelle smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment. "It's a step in the right direction. I hope it leads to real, lasting change." Later that week, Michelle attended a community event focused on racial justice. The atmosphere was charged with energy and hope, and Michelle was touched by the stories shared by individuals who had faced similar struggles. As she listened to the speakers, a young woman approached her with a nervous smile. "Hi, Michelle. I just wanted to say thank you for speaking out. Your story gave me the courage to stand up against the discrimination I've faced." Michelle's heart warmed at the words. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to know that my experience can inspire others. Remember, you're not alone in this." The young woman nodded, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "I won't forget that. Your bravery has made a difference in my life." The event concluded with a powerful call to action, and Michelle left feeling both inspired and determined. The personal connections and stories she encountered reinforced her commitment to the cause. Back at the studio, Michelle and Lisa were preparing for an upcoming interview. Michelle was scheduled to speak with a well-known journalist who had been following her journey closely. As the interview began, the journalist asked Michelle about her plans for the future. "What do you hope to achieve with all the work you're doing?" Michelle took a moment to reflect before answering. "My hope is to create a ripple effect. By addressing these issues openly and advocating for change, I want to see a world where everyone, regardless of their race or background, is treated with respect and dignity. It's about building a more inclusive society where these conversations are no longer necessary because equality and understanding are the norms." The journalist nodded thoughtfully. "That's a powerful vision. And it seems like you're on the right path." As the interview wrapped up, Michelle felt a deep sense of purpose. Each conversation, each event, and each story shared brought her closer to her goal. She knew the journey was far from over, but with every step, she was contributing to a broader movement for change. When Michelle arrived home that evening, she was greeted by her supportive friends and family. They gathered for a quiet dinner, reflecting on the progress and challenges ahead. The conversation was filled with optimism and encouragement. Michelle's father looked at her with pride. "We're so proud of everything you've achieved, Michelle. Your strength and determination are inspiring." Her mother added, "And remember, we're with you every step of the way." Michelle felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you. I couldn't do this without all of you. Your support means the world to me." As they shared a moment of warmth and unity, Michelle knew that she was not alone in her fight. The path forward was filled with challenges, but with the collective strength of those around her and the ongoing support from the community, she was ready to continue her journey toward a more just and equitable world. Months had passed since Michelle's panel discussion, and the initiative for racial equity and inclusion was gaining traction. The media coverage had been positive, and Michelle's advocacy work had begun to influence the conversation on a national level. One crisp morning, Michelle sat in her office reviewing notes for an upcoming speech. The door opened, and Lisa walked in, holding a thick envelope. "Morning, Michelle. Look what came in the mail," Lisa said, handing over the envelope. Michelle raised an eyebrow and took the envelope. "What's this?" Lisa shrugged with a playful smile. "I have no idea. Let's see." Michelle opened the envelope and pulled out an invitation to a prestigious award ceremony recognizing individuals who had made significant contributions to social justice and equality. The award was named the Unity Award, and it was to be presented at a grand gala in New York City. "Wow, Lisa. This is incredible!" Michelle exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. Lisa's smile grew. "I thought you'd like it. They're recognizing your efforts and the impact you've had." Michelle felt a surge of emotion. "I'm honored, but this is also a reflection of everyone who has supported me and been part of this journey." Later that day, Michelle prepared for the gala. The event was elegant, held in a grand ballroom with shimmering chandeliers and beautifully decorated tables. Michelle was both excited and nervous as she arrived at the venue, dressed in a stunning gown. Anna Davis, who had also been invited, greeted Michelle at the entrance. "You look amazing, Michelle. This is a well-deserved honor." Michelle smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Anna. I still can't believe it." Anna patted her on the back. "You've worked hard for this. Tonight is about celebrating your achievements and the progress you've helped bring about." As the evening progressed, Michelle mingled with other honorees and guests. The atmosphere was filled with optimism and camaraderie. She was particularly moved by the stories of fellow activists and change-makers, each sharing their own journeys and struggles. Finally, it was time for the award ceremony. The lights dimmed, and the presenter took the stage. Michelle sat at her table, her heart racing with anticipation. She could feel the weight of the moment. The presenter began to speak, highlighting the accomplishments of each nominee. When Michelle's name was announced, the audience erupted in applause. Michelle walked to the stage, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. As she accepted the award, she looked out at the audience, seeing familiar faces among the crowd. She began her acceptance speech with a deep breath. "Thank you so much for this honor. I'm deeply moved and grateful. This award is not just for me but for all the voices that have come together to push for change. It's for the countless individuals who have shared their stories, faced their struggles, and worked tirelessly for a more just world." She paused as the audience applauded. "The real achievement is the progress we're making together. We have a long way to go, but each step forward counts. Let's continue to support one another, challenge the status quo, and strive for a future where everyone is treated with respect and dignity." The applause grew louder as Michelle concluded her speech. She felt a wave of relief and joy, knowing that her message was resonating with those present. After the ceremony, Michelle found herself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. Among them was her family, who had come to celebrate her achievement. Her father hugged her tightly. "We're so proud of you, Michelle. You've come so far." Her mother added, "You've done amazing things, and this is just the beginning." Michelle's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you, Mom and Dad. Your support has been my anchor through all of this." As the night drew to a close, Michelle reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The recognition was a testament to the hard work and dedication of many individuals, not just herself. It symbolized a collective effort toward a more equitable society. Driving home from the gala, Michelle felt a renewed sense of purpose. The award was a milestone, but she knew there was still much work to be done. With the support of her loved ones and the momentum she had built, she was ready to embrace the challenges ahead and continue her advocacy for a world where justice and equality were not just ideals but realities. The future was uncertain, but Michelle was determined to face it with the same courage and conviction that had guided her through her journey so far. The day after the award ceremony, Michelle woke up feeling a mix of elation and exhaustion. The recognition had been an incredible honor, but she knew that the real work lay ahead. She had scheduled a meeting with Anna Davis and Lisa to discuss the next steps for the Racial Equity Initiative. As Michelle arrived at the office, she was greeted by Anna and Lisa, who were already discussing plans. "Good morning, Michelle," Anna said with a warm smile. "I hope you're feeling as good as you looked last night." Michelle chuckled, sitting down at the conference table. "Thank you. Last night was a whirlwind, but it was worth it. I'm ready to dive back into work." Lisa handed Michelle a stack of papers. "We've been working on expanding the initiative's scope. We want to reach more communities and make an even bigger impact." Michelle glanced through the documents. "These look promising. What's the plan?" Anna opened a presentation on her laptop. "We're proposing a series of community workshops in different cities, focusing on both education and activism. We want to empower local leaders and create platforms for marginalized voices." Lisa nodded. "We're also planning a nationwide campaign to raise awareness about systemic racism and encourage people to take action." Michelle felt a surge of excitement. This is exactly what we need. It's about creating a network of support and driving tangible change at every level. Anna agreed. Exactly. And we've already started reaching out to potential partners and sponsors. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. As the meeting continued, Michelle brainstormed ideas for the workshops and campaign. They discussed potential speakers, topics, and outreach strategies. The energy in the room was palpable as they planned each detail meticulously. Later that day, Michelle met with a local activist, Maya Johnson, who had been instrumental in grassroots organizing. Maya was passionate about community engagement and had worked on similar initiatives before. "Hi, Maya. Thanks for meeting with me," Michelle said as they sat in a cozy cafe. Maya smiled. "Of course, Michelle. I've heard great things about your work. What can I help with?" Michelle explained the new initiative and the goals they were aiming to achieve. "We want to partner with local organizations and activists to make a real difference. Your experience could be invaluable." Maya's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "I'd love to be involved. Community outreach is where we can make the most impact. Let's work together to create something meaningful." They spent the next few hours discussing strategies and ways to engage local communities. Maya offered insights and suggestions that would enhance the initiative's effectiveness. As the sun began to set, Michelle felt a renewed sense of hope. The collaboration and support from others were reinforcing her belief in the potential for change. When she arrived home, she found a message from a young woman named Lisa who had attended one of her earlier events. Lisa was reaching out to thank Michelle for her influence on her own activism journey. "Hi Michelle," the message read. "I just wanted to let you know that your speech at the panel really inspired me. I've started organizing local events in my community to raise awareness about racial justice. Thank you for showing me how to be a better advocate." Michelle read the message with a smile, her heart swelling with pride. She responded, "Thank you so much for your kind words, Lisa. I'm thrilled to hear that my work has inspired you. Keep up the amazing work, and together, we can make a difference." As she finished her day, Michelle reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The recognition, the new initiatives, and the stories of those she had inspired were a testament to the progress being made. But she knew the fight for justice and equality was ongoing. Sitting by the window, looking out at the city lights, Michelle felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path ahead was filled with challenges, but she was committed to pushing forward, knowing that every step, every effort, and every voice contributed to a greater movement for change. With a deep breath, Michelle prepared for the work that lay ahead, ready to continue her mission with renewed energy and a steadfast resolve.